Thank you, Paige, and thank you everyone for being here. I'm Elizabeth Chant with Vermont Energy Investment Corporation, and here is a quick overview of where we're going tonight. Start with some introductions, some definitions. We're going to spend most of our time on measures, and they are specific to the geographic area that we're concerned with tonight. Talk about impacts and talk about remedies. Quick introductions. First, I'm with Efficiency Vermont and VEIC. Efficiency Vermont, as many of you know, is a statewide energy efficiency utility, the first in the nation, and it is administered by Vermont Energy Investment Corporation under appointment of the Public Utility Commission in Vermont. We have offices in Burlington, Barre, and Rutland. We provide sustainable energy solutions to all Vermonters, all ratepayers, all classes, business, institutional, industrial, commercial, residential, low-income, market rate. Everyone who lives in Vermont has access to our services, and over the 17, 18 years we've been in existence, we've touched nearly all of them. It's pretty amazing, household by household. I'm Elizabeth Chant. I've been doing this work for about 23 years now, focused specifically on low-income people and multifamily buildings. Now, when I go outside of Vermont, New Hampshire, people are like, multifamily buildings in Vermont, what's that, a two-stall barn? Especially the people in New York, they're very skeptical of everything. But we have multifamily housing everywhere, but really it's the question of energy burden that has driven me for those 23 years. You can see other information here and call me if you're interested about any of that. Before I get into definitions, I want to say, I'm Elizabeth, and I'm going to step out of role. I'm not a consultant right now. I'm the picture of low income. I can't afford to heat my house. I'm a low income American. I'm white. I'm female. Let's say I have 2 young children. I'm a little old for young children, but let's say I have 2 young children. What happens, and this is a question for you, what happens if I can't heat my house? What happens? I can't pay my bill.
Public assistance.
Public assistance. Yep. There's help to LIHEAP to help me pay my bill. And I'm sorry to the videographer, I hate being behind a podium. What else? What happens? What happens if I can't get public assistance? If I can't pay my bill? Even LIHEAP only covers about 50% of a bill. It is the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program. I'm going to throw some numbers in this as we go along, and you'll see a lot of numbers. What else can happen? What can happen?
Pipes can freeze.
I'm sorry?
Pipes can freeze.
Pipes can freeze. Wow, I've just ruined my biggest investment if I'm a homeowner. I've ruined my property, my rental property owner's investment if I'm not. What happens if I am a renter? I heard the eviction word. Who's been following the eviction debates lately? It's wonderful, the research that's going on nationally now about eviction rates. It's scary. I can be evicted. I saw a hand over here.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing.
Eviction.
I know somebody who paid the heat and then couldn't pay the rent.
That's right. Right. I can't pay my rent. Do I pay my rent or do I pay for the heat? What about my kids? What can happen to my kids?
Sick.
They can get sick. Yep, they probably will get sick. What else can happen?
Well, they can go without food.
Bingo. What else can happen? They can get taken away. We are criminalizing poverty. My children can be taken from me. What else can happen even if they're staying, playing on the cold floor? Turns out there's research, they won't develop quite as quickly as the kids who are crawling around on the warm floors. They may be bundled more, they may not have the different ways of moving when they're at that critical stage of brain development. All kinds of research on this now. So the effects of what we're about to talk about, I'm going to throw all sorts of numbers at you. It's not about the numbers. It's about people who are struggling to live in the houses. They are our neighbors. So, now that I brought you all down, let's get into some statistics. That'll bring everybody right back up. So, energy burden. What do we mean by energy burden? It's really a pretty simple calculation. It's annual household income divided by energy costs. And I think I just screwed it up there. It's energy cost divided by annual income. These are the factors that affect energy burden. It is a metric that's used internationally, which is why a lot of energy professionals in the US are starting to center on it. It's something that's used internationally, and there are comparative metrics that we can look at. What affects it? Well, income affects it. How much energy I use affects it. How much energy costs affects it. So I could have low energy use, but if my energy cost, my energy rate is high, I have a higher energy burden. I can have low energy cost because I don't use much, and I have low rates, but I also have a low income, so I have a high energy burden. So basically it's just math. Average in the US, these are for the current year. These are data from the National Association of Energy Assistance Directors, NEADA. And the expected average across the US, average energy cost per household is $861. For the average family, that means 2 cents per dollar earned. That's their energy burden, 2%. For a low-income family, 5 times that average burden, 10 cents for the average low-income family. And as we'll see here and in some other slides, it can go even higher than that. One important fact here is this is home energy. It doesn't include transportation. If you look at the largest expense for any household in the US, housing is one, transportation is number 2, actually. Most people don't know that. Both of those, as you all know, have energy components. Energy is a really high part of our average burden. When we talk about energy burden, though, normally we're talking about home energy burden. We aren't including that transportation burden, although some researchers are starting to pay attention to that. So let's look at low income in our area. When we talk about low income, what do we mean? Well, in New Hampshire, the range of low income is 73 of area median income. So it's the median income for generally a county area or a metropolitan area. In New Hampshire, those range across the state. The lowest income county has about a $73,000 AMI, the highest $103,000. Vermont averages somewhat below that. Moderate income across the US is considered somewhere in the 80 to 120% of area median income. Low income, these next are HUD definitions, the US Agency of Housing and Urban Development. Low income is below 80% AMI, very low income, below 50%. Extremely low is below 30% of AMI, and actually it's tragic that HUD is now tracking DLI, which I forget what it stands for. In my mind, it's desperately low income. And I know that's not the official definition, but below 15%. So let's get into some measures now. The data that you're going to see are new data that came out of a really nice an accelerator project, it was called, at the Department of Energy. Somebody put together census tract by census tract, county by county, state by state, information on energy burden. So, the data I'm pointing to here, you're going to see some graphs. You can easily go online and get the data for your county, your town, even your census tract. I'm keeping it at the state level. I'm going to start with New Hampshire, not because the sun rises there first, but because it's first alphabetically. And I want to spend a little time on this just because most of these graphs are going to lay out the same way. What you're going to see is on the left you'll see owner-occupied. And I am going to step out here. So this is owner-occupied houses. This is renter-occupied. Another statistic I didn't give when I was talking about being low income is, on average, renters make half of what homeowners make. That's a really compelling statistic. So, in each of these categories, we're going to be looking at each of the slides we look at. These are low-income categories, right up to to the first three are low-income categories. Extremely low income, very low income, moderate income, and pretty much everybody else. So that trend is going to follow for all the slides. On the left here, we have the average energy expenditures as a fraction of income. So that's the energy burden. Oh, thank you.
Green button.
Thank you. Green button, red light. So this, the blue line is the average energy burden for people who are making this much money, 0 to 30% of AMI, in New Hampshire, living in their own homes. The right one and the orange bars is average expenditure level. So how much in real dollars are they spending? So the numbers here to look at are the burden, we saw this number already. This is around 2% for all New Hampshire households. It goes up to 27% in New Hampshire. 27% energy burden. The costs go up to about $4,000 a year for energy. That is a lot of money for a low-income household. Notice renters are less, in general, on the real dollar part. Why is that? Why do renters have a lower energy cost?
Smaller units?
Smaller units, exactly. In general, owners live in larger domiciles than renters. Why are we going through all this? Because if you're going to go help people with energy burden, it's good to know the data. We'll come back to that in a minute. Now, this looks at it by tenure, again, owner and renter, and by construction date. Now, what would we expect?
Older houses.
Older houses, generally less efficient. Yeah, and we sort of see that. Not quite, but sort of. This starts out before 1940, 40 to 59, 60 to 79, and up to, this is 2010 and later for construction date. So we do sort of see some trend that way, but it's not perfect, that's for sure. And one thing that's interesting here, it's less what, when I get to the Vermont slide, you're actually going to see the effect of the energy code in Vermont. New Hampshire does not have as strong an energy code as Vermont does. The other thing that goes on here that's a little, none of us in the energy world like is, this is going up at some level. Why is that?
Bigger houses.
Bigger houses. We've made them more energy efficient, and what do people do? They build, the average square footage for a new house has gone up and up and up. By heating fuel, it's good to know what people heat with. How does the energy burden vary by heating fuel? Well, that one's really obvious. And for any of those of you who have dealt with bottled gas dealers, you can see. People who are using LP gas compared to utility gas, electricity, fuel oil, other or none, are generally paying, they have a much higher energy burden. They're paying more money. And then last, by building type. What's the highest energy cost? Single family. There's two kinds of single family. DOE breaks the data down for us. There's single family detached and single family attached. And generally the single family and the small multis, which in New England, most of the 2 and 4 units started out as single family, so you could say, well, most of them are single family anyway, in construction type. They generally have the highest energy costs. Now the data for Vermont, it's not that dissimilar from New Hampshire, but we want to cover both states equally. So by tenure, again, we have energy burdens that range up to about 27% at the highest for owner-occupied, and about 22% for renter-occupied. By construction date, as I said, you can, I think what's going on here, and I haven't dug deep into these data, but I think what's going on here is you can actually see the energy code in Vermont is significantly stronger than what we used to build in the past and what's being built in other states. That's a nice thing to see. By heating fuel, we see the same spike for LP gas users as we do in New Hampshire. And then last, by building type, same rough trend, that we've got single family, detached and attached as the high energy users. Once you get into the small multis, 5 to 9 units, or the larger multis of 10 to 20 and plus, you get a lower energy cost, a smaller energy burden. So, that's the fun part, that's the data. That's what energy geeks like, they like data.
Does this break out mobile homes?
This does not break out mobile homes. In the graphing, the underlying data, I do believe you can get at that, but in the graphs that they sort of pre-populate for you, it's not included. Mobile homes, energy hogs, and that's about, depending on what state you're in, it's about 7-10% of the housing units and population. Somebody mentioned the Vermont earlier. Yes, that's a way to reduce the energy burden. So let's talk about impacts for a couple of minutes. VLS, Vermont Law School, did a study in 2015. They published it. It was looking at data from 94 to 2012, so 12 years of data. Most of us don't realize that cold can kill, but it does. And in Vermont, on average, excess winter mortalities were more than auto accidents. These are deaths. Most of us in the energy efficiency world didn't realize we were dealing with life and death issues. These are deaths. People are dying from this. What Vermont Law School came out with a very rigorous statistical study, was that there are 174 excess winter mortalities per year in Vermont. This was Vermont specific. But I think a lot of it can be bridged into other cold weather states. There's another nice study. We talked, when we were talking about what can happen to the kids, they don't eat, they don't get their medicine, mom doesn't get her medicine. There is a good study by the National Bureau of Economic Research. It's a few years old now, but I don't think the underlying findings have changed much. When it gets cold, the rich and the poor both increase the heat they use. But the rich also increase their calorie intake. The poor don't. They decrease their calorie intake. That's tragic. So what can we do? We talked LIHEAP. We can provide subsidies to help people who are in this situation. We can reduce energy costs by working on the rates, or working on what you all work on, making homes more efficient. I talked about one of the reasons I always go to the data and sort of noodle the data and drive into the data is the Jesse James principle of energy efficiency, which is Jesse James said, why? Somebody asked him, why do you rob banks? And he said, that's where the money is. And in energy efficiency, we say, why do we look at the data? Well, that can tell us where to target our efforts. So I would encourage you, go look at that source of data. Pull your town down. You may find some interesting things. You may find some anomalies. You may find things you didn't expect to find about the housing stock, the people, the characteristics, etc. But data are never bad. They can always help you target your efforts. And with that, I will give you my contact information. Paige, you said that, Paige and Sarah said the slides are available on the website. And if there's any questions along the way, we will have questions tonight after Paul and Angela speak. And I'll turn it over to Paul now. Thank you.